Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be giving you guys a flip through of the first language lessons for the Well-Trained Mind, but this one is level 4. So I had a request. I know I've given a walkthrough kind of flipping through the table of contents and some of the things that are including in levels 1 through 3, but this is a new addition for our homeschool this year. And so I think someone had requested, they couldn't find one to kind of see a little glimpse on the inside of what this curriculum entails. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. So I'm going to go ahead and flip my camera around and give you guys a little look into this curriculum. All right, so I'm going to attempt to give you a little flip through now of this curriculum. So it's set up very similarly as levels 1 through 3. So we start out with the table of contents, and I'm just going to kind of hold it over, get a little closer. If at any point you guys need to pause it so you can kind of examine what we're covering in this curriculum, you'll be able to do so, but that way it kind of gives you at a glance what you're going to be learning throughout the year. So you will notice through these that you have things that are going to be very similar as in the past, where we have poem memorization, where we have review of prior lessons. And you're going to notice too that new things are, well, in this one are labeled new, but they're also bolded, whereas things that are review are a little lighter. So you can kind of gauge whether a lesson's going to be covering new material or if it's going to be review material, whether you're going to be doing poem memorization, you know, or some narratives or dictation exercises and those as well. You'll also see that you have some optional end units where you can have some lessons about writing letters as well as doing some dictionary skills. And then too, it always has this introduction about how you're going to use this curriculum. So how it has 4 strands where you're doing memory work, where you're memorizing poetry, but you're also memorizing rules and definitions. So you're memorizing the definition for maybe a noun or a pronoun or a verb or an adverb, an adjective, different things like that, the different parts of speech. You also do some copy work and dictation exercises. They also do some narration where you are going to read them a story and the student is listening, and then they're going to be summarizing in their own words, you know, what you just read to them, and maybe answer a few questions as well. And then also have some grammar work. And that's again just showing you how to use it. And then this is kind of again showing you how to use the lessons, where, you know, this is suggested wording for the instructor. This is suggested answer for the students, and they would be in italics. And then they have, again, they have a workbook that you can buy that goes with this. I do not buy the workbook for my kids. We just use a regular notebook, or we do things orally instead of doing any writing. So that's kind of up to you. If you would like to do the workbook, you'll be able to see in some of the example pages how the workbook might be helpful if that is something that you're wanting to include in with your students' work. So here's an example, lesson 1, the parts of this book. This is where you're learning, you know, about the title, and you're learning about the author, and, you know, the copyright law and different parts of a book. Then here we're moving to where we're doing you know, nouns. So you can tell here that I've done something different where I have crossed out. So I have shared before that we have done classical conversations, and in classical conversations we do some memory work where we are memorizing some English definitions, and that included a noun. And so when we have memorized this in the past, we have learned it that a noun names a person, place, thing, activity, or idea. So you can tell where I have scratched it out. This is kind of just to remind me when I'm going over the definition with my kids, that I want to have one definition across all the different things that we're using. And since we'd already memorized this, I just change it in here for my sanity. I don't want them trying to, okay, which definition of a noun do you want? Do you want this one or that one? So if you have memorized something in the past, go, feel free to change it in your own book and, not have to worry about having 2 or 3 different definitions. They're pretty much the exact same thing, just changed very slightly. And I just thought it would be easier for my kids to have it. But again, you're going through and you're learning the definition of a noun. You can see where the instructor is supposed to be speaking, and it can give you that if you feel like you need it. Again, do not be a slave to the curriculum. If you know how to teach this, do not feel like you need to read this verbatim to your kids, especially if they know this. You don't have to kind of go word for word if they're really excelling in a certain area. But if you do need it, don't feel bad about using it. That's always my 2 cents that I want to share. If you need it, use it. But if you don't, then feel free to kind of change it to how it works with your kids. So here's another one here's an example of where we would be using a workbook. And so it says here, in your workbook, read the list of nouns in exercise 1. And so my kids do not have the workbook. So this would be an example where I would just do something orally, where I would say beach. Okay, is that a person, place, thing, activity, or idea? And so he would tell me it's a place. Now, if you wanted them to do some writing, you could always write these words down, and they could write beside them person, place, thing, activity, or idea. Or you could do this exact thing in a notebook, and they could draw the lines, and it would take a little bit of prep time for you to write these things in a notebook. But finance, I always like to mention that, because if financiers are an issue, this is one way to combat that. But you could do it orally. You could buy the workbook, or you could rewrite it on, a dry erase board if you wanted, and your kids could have fun with a dry erase board on it. Sometimes we also do stuff on just like a small handheld dry erase board that my kids can use. Same thing here. Here's another answer key where we're talking about singular and plural nouns, of how to make them plural. Are we adding s, es kind of thing? Sometimes we do it orally, sometimes we do it in a notebook, or sometimes we do it on a dry erase board. So again, just going over some rules. They have the answer key, so that would be if you had a workbook. So again, just going over all the different rules and the way you would apply of making nouns plural. So you're going to see that a lot of these are very similar. There is a lot more, I will say, in glancing at this compared to levels 1 and 3, a lot more of like answer key things that would be included in a workbook than in levels 1 through 3, but it still is not making me want to get the workbook. We'll just do a lot of things orally. You will see too that in this one they're learning to proofread. So they're going to learn how to make lowercase and capitalize. So in this exercise over here, pause when you get to an underlined noun, and then you would say it emphatically, and then asking if they should be capitalized. As if it's a common noun, it wouldn't be. If it's a proper noun, it would be capitalized, kind of thing. So they're learning to determine, and then also teaching them how they would maybe write that if they were actually proofreading on paper by crossing it out and writing lowercase. So again, this is all very similar as it. You're going to see it's not colorful. It doesn't have a lot of pictures or anything. It's all black and white, and it has the same layout here of what the instructor says, what might be in a workbook, what the student might say. So all of it's going to go very similar as the previous levels. But you will notice, let's see, that's lesson 5. Let's skip forward a little bit. So here's an example of a summary exercise where you're reading a portion, and then you're going to be asking some questions after it. So once you read it, then what are 2 things that you remember about the passage? What was the most important thing that you remembered about the passage? And what was the most interesting thing? So again, just having them listen and be able to kind of regurgitate the main and key points of what you read. So we're really focusing on their listening skills and their ability to kind of tell you what they heard. which is a skill. Sometimes we take that for granted. And you're going to see too that we are still working on diagramming. So I know I've shared this before. This is not one of my favorite things, but it is something that, you know, if you love diagramming, it is included in level 4 as well as level 3. So if you were really hoping to find that, you're in luck. There is still diagramming in this one, but is obviously starting out very slowly, where we have a very simple sentence, rain poured, and how we would include it, and then also learning how to add in some adjectives. So it starts out maybe a little bit quicker than in level 3, and you might advance a little bit faster, but still progressing along the same way. Here is another example of a different kind of lesson where we have the poem memorization. You're going to notice that the poems are getting a little bit more difficult, a little bit longer than in the previous levels, but still following the same concept where you're repeating the poem over and over and then hoping to commit it to memory. So that's another example. Going back to diagramming some more sentences. So that was lesson 17, if that gives you an example about how fast we're moving along here. And then let's move up. Let's see. Let's go a little further. Lesson 26. So here we're going to be doing some direct and indirect objects and subjects, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. So you're going to see our diagramming is getting a little bit more complicated here. We're adding in some, you know, adverbs and adjectives. Again, too, for these, you know, it would have the sentence in here for your workbook. We use a notebook for these, and we just use notebook paper, and then I would write the sentence above, and then my kids have just always diagrammed the sentence below it. So again, just another way to save some money is, you know, just using some notebook paper if that works for you. I will say it takes some prep time, so you kind of have to weigh, do I want to use my time or use my money kind of thing. Another poem memorization here. Skip forward a little bit. So now we're doing some linking verbs, predicate nominatives, and subject and object pronouns. So here we are. Here's another example of memorizing another list where we're memorizing the linking verbs. So am, is, are, was, were, be, being, been, and they give you like a little chant to do with the linking verbs. So they have some idea, you know, am, is, are, was, were, be, being, been. So we always did a little chant like that because it tells you to clap. So again, more diagramming. Doing some more proofreading examples here. Let's skip through. Going to lesson 44. Here we're working with prepositions. So we are memorizing a list of prepositions. So this would be another example where we have memorized a list of prepositions from our classical conversations group. So I would probably put a sticky note over that and we would go along with our list. But if you don't, then this is a great list to be able to use. To have some prepositions, because you can see here now we're moving into prepositional phrases. So this is going to get them ready for diagramming prepositional phrases in your diagramming, your sentence diagramming. So again, we're getting a little bit more complicated as we go. So I'm jumping forward. This is lesson 48. Again, just you can see the progression over time of where your sentences are coming from. We started with, what was it, rain poured, and now we're getting to her clothes in the basket beside the washer are clean. So we're getting much more complicated sentences and learning how to diagram those. Again, prepositional phrases that describe verbs. So again, just really working on prepositional phrases. I will say that those get very difficult, at least for my oldest. We were really working on those last year. So this one, we may not move super quickly in this curriculum with my second. So again, this is the first time that we have done this curriculum. So we'll kind of see how it goes and see how it works for our family. But being that diagramming sentences are just not my jam, this might be tricky for us, but we will see. So let's keep moving here. Again, still doing some diagramming. This one was talking about predicate nominatives, predicate adjectives, the different kinds of verbs, direct objects, and indirect objects. So this one's a jam-packed lesson. So skip forward a little bit. Here we get to lesson 64, talking about direct quotations at the beginning of sentences and also the 4 types of sentences. Here's another poem memorization. That one's long. More diagramming, more prepositional phrases, adverbs here. Conjunctions, compound subjects, compound predicates. So again, just some more topics that we are covering. Here is another narration where you're going to be reading a little bit about Abraham Lincoln, answering some questions. Now we're doing comparative and superlative adverbs. So it definitely builds in lots of review. And I think it's important to understand that if one lesson just seems like too much to handle in one day, there is no harm in cutting one lesson down and covering it in 2 days or 3 days or whatever works for your kid. Just because it's one book doesn't mean that you have to finish it in 1 year. So a lot of times you're going to see that it's covering lots of different topics in one day, and there's lots of pages. Shorten, make it a little bit shorter and doable for your kids if that is necessary, especially because it didn't have, a lot. It didn't even go to 100 lessons before the extra pieces were, so the optional end units. So it only went to 85 lessons. So you're really not, if you really needed to break up some of the 85 lessons, you definitely could, because it stopped at 85, which was a poem review of all the different poems they memorized throughout the year. And then you start on the different end units. You had contractions, and then writing letters, and then it had some dictionary skills too, where it's going to be, learning about alphabetizing by first, second, third, and fourth letters, and probably just finding some different words in a dictionary. So that is pretty much it. Obviously, at the back of the book, you do have your index, so if you needed to find anything, that is always there too. But that is it. It is definitely a thick book here. Let me pull it up so you can see. With lots of information covered. So again, 85 lessons, but if you needed to break it down to make it into bite-sized chunks for your kids, I think that would be perfectly acceptable. That actually might be, looking at some of the later lessons and how long they are, that might be actually a good idea for my kiddo who's going to be doing that. But that is a flip through of this. If you guys have any questions about a particular lesson or want to see something, let me know. Alright guys, so that's it. I just wanted to kind of let you have an idea. I know a lot of times if we are buying things online, we don't really have a very good idea of what's included in some of the curriculum. You're kind of buying it blind, so to speak. And so if you're like me and you want to know what's included in some pieces of curriculum, I hope you guys found this helpful, because if you were wondering about this but not really sure of what was included in it, hopefully this kind of either is going to allow you to push you over the edge so that you can buy it, or kind of deter you from and think, okay, maybe this isn't the best fit for our family. So hopefully you guys found it helpful. If you guys have any other questions, as usual, I am happy to answer anything that I can about this particular curriculum. So just drop the questions below. And if you've used it before and you found it helpful, let me know that too. Like I said, this is the first time that we're including this in our homeschool. We've always done levels 1 through 3, but this is the first time that we're kind of advancing up to level 4 for my second oldest. And until next time, guys, have a blessed day.